Hello and welcome to Politics Tonight, everyone. Thank you for joining us this evening. I'm Olajumoke Olatunji. People's Democratic Party's Board of Trustees recognizes Sunday Ude Okoye as the party's authentic national secretary. Tonight, we shall be revisiting the African Energy Summit in Tanzania. My guest tonight is Abba Aliyu, Managing Director, Rural Electrification Agency. Welcome to the program, everyone. Stay with us. I'll be right back. Thank you very much for staying with us. Now let's bring you some political developments. The Board of Trustees of the People's Democratic Party has affirmed Sunday Ude Okoye as the party's national secretary. The BOT made this resolution after a 2-hour closed-door meeting in Abuja. Senior reporter Adamawa reports.
Another effort by the PDP Board of Trustees to settle a crisis that is already tearing apart Nigeria's biggest opposition party. This time around, they have taken sides in the fight between Samuel Anyanwu and Sunday Ude Okoye over who is the legitimate national secretary of the party.
The BOT charges the National Working Committee of our great party to recognize and immediately swear in Honorable Sunday Ude Okoye as the National Secretary of the PDP in obedience to the judgment of the Court of Appeal. 6. The BOT urges all party organs, critical stakeholders, leaders and members across the country, as well as all democracy movement and development partners and institutions to be guided by the judgment of the Court of Appeal with regard to the position of the National Secretary of the People's Democratic Party.
It remains to be seen if the decision of the party's Board of Trustees will be binding on the National Working Committee. This decision is also in consonance with the verdict of the PDP Governors Forum endorsing Sunday Ude Okoye as the legally backed National Secretary of the party. But the embattled Samuel Anyanwu, who is also laying claim to the position of National Secretary, is not living without a fight. In a last-ditch move, he has obtained several court injunctions preventing his removal and even written to the Inspector General of Police, warning that any attempt to remove him from office will be an invitation to chaos. He insists an appeal has been filed in the Supreme Court against the quoted judgment affirming Ude Okoye as the PDP National Secretary. For now, the matter has not been settled and the National Working Committee is yet to confirm who indeed is its authentic National Secretary. The BOT is a high-level advisory body and unable to force its decision on the NWC. Its meeting will henceforth be held outside the party's secretariat. The Board of Trustees serve as an advisory organ of the party, but the major decision still lies with the National Working Committee. Habida Lawal, TVC News, Abuja.
President Bola Tinubu has increased the proposed budget size for 2025 from 49.7 trillion naira to 54.2 trillion naira. The president's request was communicated through a letter sent to the Senate. President of the Senate, Godswill Akpabio, explained that the increase was derived from 1.4 trillion naira additional revenues made by the Federal Inland Revenue Service, 1.2 trillion naira by the Nigeria Customs Service, and 1.8 trillion naira generated by some other government-owned agencies. The President of the Senate has now directed the request to the Senate Committee on Appropriations for expeditious consideration. The newly appointed district heads and chiefs in Adamawa State have been encouraged to be fair and just in discharging their responsibilities. That call is coming from stakeholders in Fali, Betso, and Mayabani districts of Adamawa State. Senior reporter Owolabi Adenosi found in this report.
In the next few days, Governor Fintiri will be handing over the staff of office to the newly appointed chiefs. Delegation from Fali, Betso, and Mayabani districts in Mubi is identified with the created districts of Lawe, Peda, Betso, and Yewa. The group led by Joshua Atiku explains that their mission is to impart crucial messages aimed at guiding the newly appointed leaders. The messages to the district heads are clear: provide leadership that is selfless, purposeful, humble, and people-oriented.
Let the traditional leaders synergize with the people, galvanize people for development. ensure that they bring the people together to form a common front to fight the ills of society, to bring a new dawn in terms of development, youth engagement, women employment, and prosperity in the society.
It is important that the new district heads will try to organize their subjects, their people, so that they can fight whatever will come to them as terrorism or whatever, or Boko Haram.
The district heads have vowed to fight insurgency, to fight insecurity, to a standstill.
The governor, though he's a Muslim, but he has fulfilled one particular scripture which says, when the righteous are in government, people rejoice.
The traditional leader uses the forum to thank Governor Ahmadu Fintiri for trusting them with the new mandate. The royal father also dwelled on the need to promote cultural and traditional heritage by all stakeholders. Promoting peace and development at the grassroots level is the cornerstone of this visit, as the elite wants the new district heads to prioritize initiatives that will enhance local security and build a robust sense of community belonging.
Let's take a short break, and when we return, we turn our attention to the African Energy Summit in Tanzania. And I will be speaking with Abba Aliyu, the Managing Director, Rural Electrification Agency. Stay with us, everyone.
Every major news story is with many perspectives and layered with different levels of impact.
Hello. What time did
TVC News? First, with breaking news.
Coming up in the month of February, on the 2nd of February is the World Wetlands Day, and the 4th of February is the day set aside to create awareness on cancer. On the 6th of February, we turn our attention to the International Day of Zero Tolerance to News as we bring you reports and analysis of these events.
TVC News, first with breaking news.
Welcome back, everyone. 30 African heads of state and governments have signed a landmark declaration committing to concrete reforms aimed at expanding access to reliable, affordable and sustainable electricity across the continent. The leaders made this pledge in late January during the Mission 300 Africa Energy Summit held in the Tanzania commercial capital of Dar es Salaam. The declaration, known as the Dar es Salaam Energy Declaration, will be submitted to the African Union Summit this month for adoption. Mission 300 seeks to leverage the collective efforts of governments, development banks, partners, and the private sector to connect 300 million hours of electricity. Akumi Adesina, president of the African Development Bank Group, emphasized the need for decisive action to meet the ambitious targets outlined in the National Energy Compact. Also, Ajay Banga, president of the World Bank Group, described access to electricity as a fundamental human right and argued that it is a prerequisite for economic transformation on the continent. He says without it, countries and people cannot thrive. Our own President Bola Tinubu was in attendance, where he reiterated Nigeria's commitment to achieving universal electricity access by 2030, emphasizing the importance of energy as a catalyst for economic growth and social development.
The objective of this conference is to bring together the work of the past few months, where 12 countries have created an energy compact. And what does that mean? That means everything ranging from trying to understand, first of all, what's required to get access to electricity. 300 million out of 600 billion people is what we want to reach. That's not a small number. It's a hard goal. It's an achievable goal. It's going to take much work. And in the past, the biggest challenge has been the absence of all hands coming together to play. One part of that hand is the regulatory policy that is required to make it clear and transparent both to development banks as well as private sector players that putting your money to work in this sector will lead to predictable outcomes.
This is mission critical. You know, this is a continent that actually loses 3 to 4% of its GDP every year because of lack of electricity. This is a place where we have 571 million Africans without access to electricity. Talk less of whether it is reliable and affordable and accessible electricity, as Ajay was mentioning. This is a continent that accounts for 83% of all the 685 million people in the world. And the Deputy Secretary General of the United Nations is here. And we are all driving with UN Secretary General to achieve SDG 7. So our mission here is to say we need everybody. We need the heads of state, and they are going to be here and talk about in a moment. We need the private sector. We need the multilateral development banks. We need the civil society. We need all of us working to do that. It's not about us. It's about those that are not here. It's about those people who are small, medium-sized enterprises that are trying to just simply have access to electricity. Small and medium-sized businesses to run our economies. That's it. It's the people that are not here. And we must listen and hear and feel their needs and make sure that this summit is an action-driven summit. And so the issue here is making sure that we hold ourselves accountable. We also build.
Joining me for more perspectives on this development tonight as we revisit the African Energy Summit is the newly appointed Managing Director of the Rural Electrification Agency, REA, Abba Aliyu. He joins me virtually. Good evening to you, Mr. Aliyu. Thank you very much for joining us on Politics Tonight, and congratulations on your appointment.
Good evening, and thank you very much for inviting me.
Right. So we'll come back to talk about you and the REA in a moment, but for now, let's focus on Africa. The highlights and takeaway from this just concluded summit, how we must ensure that this is not just another conference, how we must ensure that this is not just another yearly event where African leaders come together to make promises they never fulfill. Mission 300 is about powering Africa. 2030 is just 5 years away, with nearly half of Africa's population living without electricity. How realistic is this goal?
Thank you very much. Just before answering your question, I just need to set some context. The Mission 300, like you rightly said, it's a collective initiative of the World Bank and African Development Bank to electrify 3 million people in sub-Saharan Africa before or by 2030. Now, that decision did not just come out of the blues. There were some data that resulted in taking that drastic decision. The World Bank commissioned a consulting company called Delbag and produced the Global Energy Access Report. And when you go to that report, you will see some key trends. First among them is, for the first time in 20 years, the number of people that are without electricity access increased. The past 20 years, that number keeps reducing. But recently, just last year, we realized that that number had increased to 685 million people that are without electricity access. And the second also data that was very glaring in that report is also the number of people that are living in underserved framework, or people that are living where the electricity grid is weak. That number also increased to about 1.6 billion people globally. Then the third also data that was also very glaring is globally, the off-grid solution serve as the least cost or the most efficient way of providing electricity to these people that are without electricity access. Then thirdly, also we realize that the global funding towards renewable energy increased in the last 5 years. That number increased from, I think, 15 billion to about increased from 12.3 billion to 15.4 billion.
All right.
Then also, it was also realized that renewable energy, the share of renewable energy in the overall electricity mix globally also increased. It increased from 16.7 to about 18.7%. So which literally shows the global acceptance of off-grid as a solution to address the electricity access and the role of the renewable energy. Now, it's based on this data that the two global banks realized that since most of the 685 million people that are without access are within the sub-Saharan Africa, let there be a coordinated and collective effort by the two banks, private sector, and the public sector, the leadership of these sub-Saharan African countries, towards driving a collective effort to address this electricity access gap, achieving 100% access by 2030.
All right, Mr. Aliyu. So the next question would be, is Africa ready? I mean, if the goal is to tackle one of the continent's most pressing challenges, achieving universal, reliable, and sustainable energy access by 2030. Listening to Ajay Banga, who is the president of the World Bank, he says the biggest challenge in the past has been the absence of all hands coming together to play. One part of that hand is the regulatory policy that is required to make it clear and transparent. Perhaps this should have been my first question. Is Africa ready?
Yes, I think I can speak of Nigeria. I was there at Tanzania, and I have seen the commitment of the leadership, the commitment of the private sector, the commitment of the two banks, even the financing arm of the World Bank, the International Finance Corporation. I've seen those commitments. And one of the things why the Tanzania or the Mission 300 is different is the fact that there is clarity in terms of what needs to be done to achieve the target of 100% access by 2030. For example, in Nigerian context, there are 5 key pillars that Nigeria signed and commit to working on those pillars to make sure that the country drive this electricity access by 2030. Each of these countries, to answer your question, signed this commitment, committing 1, to transform the electricity access, 2, to increase the electricity access rate of the country. In Nigerian context, we agreed that we were going to increase our the level at which we electrify the country from the current rate of 5% to 9%. So that is a clear commitment. Secondly, is also enhancing the financial viability of the electricity market. Thirdly, is starting to work towards regional integration. And this is, if we look at, for example, the South African power pool, whereby there are many of the South Africa or East African countries that are importing or exporting electricity at a very competitive rate. So Nigeria needs to also start to look into that using the West African power pool, open its market, connect to other West African countries, import or export electricity as a way to enhance.
Mr. Aliyu, we'll come back home in a minute, but let's stay with Africa, because going by my last conversation with a professor of energy electricity law, he thinks that addressing African energy problems cannot be done without significant doses of local financing. Where does Africa stand today in terms of resources and energy mix?
Still taking the Nigerian context as an example, I think Nigeria is leading in that regard. For example, the President Ahmed Bola Tinubu, one of the first things after signing the Electricity Act he did is the approving of the distributed access through renewable energy scale-up funding, a $750 million funding, which is the biggest public sector funding in sub-Saharan Africa. So Nigeria, in that regard, we understand the need for this financing, and not only just small financing, but a large-scale financing to address this electricity access gap. Not only that, we design a program that, apart from this $750 million public funding, we design a program that will require us to catalyze a private sector funding of about $1.1 billion. One of the key outcomes of the Tanzanian summit is the signing of $70 million financing by the 4 Nigerian local renewable energy service companies, signing it as a debt financing to come and start this process of deploying infrastructure to address the electricity access challenge. So from Nigerian context, we understand the need of the public financing, and we signed the biggest public financing in sub-Saharan Africa. We understand the need of the private financing. We developed a means whereby the Nigerian and international players, renewable energy service company operating within the country, have access to not only debt but equity and grant, and that has been crystallized. You can see that not only the International Financing Corporation funding of 70 million, even the Nigerian local banks are providing a pool of resources in terms of dollar financing and local financing to this renewable energy service company. We have also seen the need of partnering with the international development agencies like United Nations Development Program, United Nations International Industrial Development Organization, to also catalyze grant funding that will be used in addressing this electricity access challenge. So in Nigerian context, we understood all this and already were put in place a means to harness these resources.
So with Nigeria's, Mr. President's commitment to achieving universal energy access by 2030, emphasizing the government's target of increasing renewable energy to constitute 50% of the national energy mix, Nigeria still relies on hydro and gas for power. And for some experts, they believe Nigeria is yet to fully tap into renewable energy options. How is this limiting the country's potential?
So part of the pillars the country signed, like I mentioned, with Nigeria's electricity access compacts that was signed by Mr. President at Tanzania, has 5 pillars. And each of these pillars has specific action plan that needs to be done to address the electricity access challenge. And like you rightly said, one of the pillars is for Nigeria to enhance investment to tap into the gas resources, for the country to unlock these gas resources, being the fact that the country, most of the generation capacity is a thermal base for the country to address the electricity access challenge. So there is that commitment of building that. I'm an off-grid person, but what I know is that that's one of the pillars signed by Mr. President, is committing to channel resources to tap into the gas resources for us to enhance our generation using the thermal resources. But practically, there is the last mile commitment, one of the pillars, which is to address the electricity access in the rural areas, which most of the electricity deficit is within these rural areas. So there is that commitment of reviewing the regulation, as Ajay Banga mentioned in his speech. It's not only about funding, but changing some regulation policy to catalyze this private sector investment, for the private sector to have the confidence that if I bring my funding, I'll be able to realize my funds and returns. So one of the pillars that also Mr. President signed is committing to change the mini-grid regulation in the country, where currently the mini-grid regulation has a cap of only 1 megawatt, but there is a need to increase that cap from 1 megawatt to maybe 5 or 10 or whatever the regulator think that it's most appropriate for the country. Reason being that the larger the capacity, the more willing the private sector is to bring in the funding and deploy large-scale mini-grid infrastructure to address the electricity access gap. So that is one of the commitments under the pillars signed by Mr. President.
All right, before we come to your agency, let me take you up on affordability. There have been, several arguments to substantiate that availability and affordability are interrelated. so that if a government decides to maintain energy prices below cost with a view to making energy more affordable to the poorest households. Please help us justify that position.
Well, for the off-grid sector, there is a very strategic framework devised by the current government to make sure that what is being generated within these rural areas is affordable. And that is de-risking the sector. One of the reasons why these rural areas do not have access to this electricity is the fact that the private sector are unwilling to go to these rural areas because, one, the consumption is always very low, and two, because of the perception of ability to pay, the affordability perception. So what the federal government did is to now de-risk that sector and incentivize the private sector to go to these rural communities, to use their resources, deploy the infrastructure, and address the electricity access gap. And the federal government directs that sector by providing capital grants to these public-private sectors using a result-based framework, whereby the private sector identify these rural areas, resource their own funding, either in form of debt, equity, or grant, deploy this infrastructure, and get a capital grant from the federal government to use that in defraying the cost of deploying that infrastructure. And we have seen that working in one of the projects that this government implemented that is called the Nigerian Electrification Project. We have seen the deployment of over 200 mini-grids, some of them very large-scale mini-grid of 1 megawatt being deployed in different communities. And the question about the affordability, it may interest you to know that payment rate within our off-grid ecosystem has been more than 90%. So the ability or the affordability is there, and we have seen where these mini grids are deployed, catalyzing socio-economic activities within the rural areas, giving these rural communities the means to afford to pay for the electricity. I give you an example in a community in Nasarawa, which has been a landmark example that we have seen. We did a demand load analysis before the deployment of the mini grid, and we realized that their consumption level is between 200 to 260 kilowatt, and we deploy about 320 kilowatt of mini grid, and within a very short period of time, the demand within that community had increased significantly to the level that we were doubting whether our initial assessment of the demand of the community was wrong. But when we went there, we now realized a new productive use of equipment, businesses that emerge within those community, which answered the question that electricity catalyze economic activities in rural areas.
Mr. Aliyu, you would agree with me that whether or not Nigerians can afford it is left for Nigerians to say. But let's talk about the agency. Last Friday, you became the substantive managing director of the Rural Electrification Agency, as announced by the presidency. Before now, you've been acting as the agency's managing director since March 2024. I mean, I can imagine the limitations that come with operating in an acting capacity. But now that you're the substantive managing director, what are your goals?
Very simple. The main mandate of Rural Electrification Agency is to create electricity access, provide access to unserved and underserved communities. Unserved, those are the rural areas that are without this access completely, and underserved are those communities that falls on the band of D and E, those that get very limited supply of electricity. So the first goal is being audacious to increase our level of penetration, electrifying 25 million Nigerians in the next 3 years using the different programs that we are implementing. One of key program is the one I mentioned, the distributed access through renewable energy scale-up, which we aim to electrify 17.5 million Nigerians. And we have a new landmark program that is called eHealth, energizing health, education, rural communities, using our rural electrification fund, where we aim to provide access to about 2.5 million Nigerians. Then we have other programs that we are designing working with the African Development Bank under the Desert to Power program, that we want to also energize about 25 million Nigerians. So the first target is to provide access to 25 million Nigerians. The second level of it is to continue to intervene in different critical sectors of the Nigerian economy. If you look at what the Rural Electrification Agency has been doing, is intervening in the health sector, education sector, and the agricultural sector. And we intend to continue to provide that. Just now, I keep on mentioning, we just provide hybrid mini-grid in 7 universities and 2 teaching hospitals, one of which is the one here in Abuja, that we deploy a 3-megawatt mini-grid providing electricity 24/7 to the universities, lecture rooms, lecturers' quarters, and the entire university. Another one is University of Maiduguri, a 12-megawatt providing electricity to the university, teaching hospital. So that is one area of our intervention. And the second one is the first event I did after being confirmed is signing 23 agreements with private sector to deploy mini-grids in selected agricultural hub areas. One of the critical factors affecting agriculture in Nigeria is post-harvest losses, and providing electricity can easily address that challenge. So this is the second point. The third is to come up with the National Electrification Strategy and Implementation Plan. And this is to have one coordinated approach of addressing electricity access in the whole country. The Electrification Act that was signed by Mr. President last year has opened the entire value chain, giving opportunities to the subnational private sector to come and participate in the entire electricity value chain. But that will require us to have a coordinated approach. Otherwise, we may have a situation whereby different stakeholders doing different things, and which may end up to be counterproductive. Right. So already we started working developing an electrification strategy where we will map the entire country, determine where are these so-called unelectrified areas, where are the underserved, and what is the least cost of providing electricity to these communities, and how best to aggregate it at the national level, so that at national level, we're going to have one conversation about electrifying, creating access, one budget for doing that, and one plan to do that. This is just 3 of the plans that we have.
Looks like you already have a lot on your table, but let's take a break, and when we return, we'll expand this conversation. Please stay with us.
Doubt and fear doesn't occur at the canvas, it shows in the canvas. It shows the conation of raw earthen material slabbed, stroked and molded at a pace provided by the doubt and fear. Every move weigh in the struggle of one to the other, merging the past to the present, brushstrokes of colors seen but not known. For when the wailing stops, the pieces settle down in abject beauty, erected for a century of a century. Speaking, advocating, protesting as the arts are meant to be.
TVC Entertainment with Wake Up Nigeria, a family and lifestyle show. Your view empowers women globally.
It's your view, let it count.
Entertainment Splash delivers the hottest celebrity trends. On TVC News, we keep you informed with breaking news and in-depth analysis of events shaping the world.
I will continue to speak the truth.
TVC News at 7 and TVC News at 10 p.m. delivers the most important stories of the day. Max FM, your hit music radio station, captivates listeners daily across Lagos and Abuja, making every commute more enjoyable. Adaba 88.9 FM is not left out, as it is the voice of Southwest. And on TVC Digital, we reach to million viewers daily. All together, pulls in over 17 million viewers daily. Contact us on 0707 272 8338 or marketing at tvccommunications.tv. Partner with TVC Communications today. Let's grow together.
Welcome back to Politics Tonight, everyone. Thank you very much for staying with us. Abba Aliyu, Managing Director, Rural Electrification Agency, is my guest tonight as we revisit African Energy Summit in Tanzania. Thank you so much for staying with us, Mr. Aliyu. Before we went on that break, you highlighted several projects that your agency had embarked on. And expectedly, when you design a project, it should come with a target. So let's talk about data. Can you bring us up to speed with the areas that are underserved in Nigeria? Also because, needs of states differ. What the residents of a place like Ileoluji in Ondo State need may be different or totally different from what a place like Maradu in Zamfara State needs. So,
electrification strategy and implementation plan, and that is exactly what that plan will come up with. We're going through the entire, at this moment, I know how many communities, entire countries that are without this electricity. And in each community, I can give you the data of how many households, what is the average load demand of that community, and I can project what it may be in the next 5 years. What is the number of public institutions within this community? What is the occupation of the people in that community? And what is the likely, the least cost means of providing electricity within that community? Should it be an isolated mini grid, or should it be an interconnected mini grid, or should we extend the national grid to that community to provide them with the electricity? So that is what this national electrification strategy and implementation plan will give. If you are following the news, you will see that REA has been engaging, doing a state-by-state roundtable. Just yesterday, we had the roundtable with Jigawa State. What we presented to Jigawa State is about 509 communities within Jigawa that would best be served using mini grid that can power over 1 million people in Jigawa State. And that is what we are doing with all the states, providing them with this data.
So if we're talking about structure, do you have personnel across the country? How do you coordinate your activities? You had said 30 million Nigerians would have electricity through what you call isolated mini grids, intercontinental, or rather interconnected mini grid, through mesh grids and solar. Could you expatiate? Also, how many viable mini grid sites do we have? Can we also have the best possible tariff cost for these areas?
Yes, so one, like I said, we have all the data of all the viable sites across the country. I don't have the total number, but state-by-state numbers can be presented. And the best means of providing those communities with the electricity is also determined. So that is one. Two, in terms of the tariff, we cannot have one uniform tariff across the communities, because tariff is contingent upon the cost of deploying the infrastructure in that community. Tariff is just a means of recouping cost of investment over a period of time. So the investment cost differs based on the communities. In some communities, when you go, like I mentioned, it's just to put an isolated mini grid, which may be cheaper compared to interconnected mini grid. In some communities, we have deploy distribution networks across the entire communities. Others, we will see some distribution network will just strengthen those distribution network. So it's contingent upon the cost that we use in deploying that infrastructure across the country. But to answer your question, yes, Rural Electrification Agency knows the total number of viable mini grid sites within the entire country. Not only that, but the socio-economic indicators of all these mini grid sites across the country. And we also, our tariff is contingent upon the cost that we deploy that infrastructure in providing the mini grid in the communities.
All right. I mean, you have an ambitious target, quite realistic as you have put it. But is there enough funding to meet your target? What's the budgetary allocation for rural electrification?
The ambition of Rural Electrification Agency is just the ambition of Mr. President. If you look at what the Mr. President has been doing, the kind of project he's executing, a very bold project, Lagos to Calabar Coastal Highway, Sokoto Badagry. These are projects that previous government can just imagine about it. And the same thing is happening in the off-grid sector. We have funding, I just told you, the biggest public sector funding ever channeled in addressing electricity access in sub-Saharan Africa. It's been signed and we have access to that.
How much
funding.
is that?
$750 million that will crystallize 1.1 billion also private sector funding. And this project had already started.
So I was talking about the 2025 budget, Mr. Aliyu.
So even in the budget, if you look at the budget proposal that Mr. President has submitted to the National Assembly, Rural Electrification Agency has a budget of over 500 billion naira, the largest ever funding in the history of the agency. We got it through Mr. President. If you go to the budget proposal, you will see a proposal of 100 billion National Public Sector Solarization Initiative, another new initiative of Mr. President to reduce the cost of governance by solarizing all the entire public sectors across the country with solar, to create reliability, to eliminate diesel cost of buying generators, and also give this MDS reliable electricity across the country. We looked at the numbers. Mr. President, seeing the numbers, decided that let's create a means to reduce this cost of governance by solarizing this public institution. And a budget proposal of 100 billion had already been provided in the budget proposal that Mr. President presented to the National Assembly.
So talk to us about the DES project, which you say is the largest public sector funded off-grid project in the world. Talk to us about it.
So it's a project with a clear target to electrify 17.5 million Nigerians using different means based on the peculiarities of the communities across the country. We intend to electrify 3 million Nigerians using isolated mini grids and electrify 1.5 million Nigerians using interconnected mini grids and about 12 million Nigerians using mesh grid and a standalone home system. So that is key target that we put out there. And the project also came in with an inbuilt sustainability we developed a concept of RESCOS, Renewable Energy Service Company. Learning from the experience of the on-grid, we see that there is need to develop a resilient vehicles that will be private sector vehicle that will implement this project across the country. And that is why we provided funding of assessing the system structures, corporate governance, and the financial viabilities of these private sectors that are deploying this infrastructure. And we also provided funds to enhance their internal processes, internal system, and their ability to raise funds. Like I told you, at the Zambia, 4 of our RESCOs Tanzania, 4 our RESCOs were able to sign a funding agreement with International Finance Corporation of the tune of $70 million. This is showing you how resilient we were able to build this vehicle. One important thing that I also must stress is that the RESCOs, the Nigerian RESCOs, have built capacity to the extent now that they are going outside the country and deploying this infrastructure. Nigerian companies are in Sierra Leone, are in Liberia, deploying this mini-grid infrastructure.
All right, Mr. Aliyu, please correct me if I'm wrong. I know state governors have must provide lands for you. Have they been cooperating at all? What's the level of compliance?
So our model, it's not dependent on a free land. Because of the sustainability we build within our project, all lands must be purchased, and we must have a clear CFO before we deploy any mini-grid infrastructure. Reason being that we know the issues around land matters, and we don't want, after deploying our infrastructure, land issues to come up which may affect the infrastructure or the funding that we commit within that community. Okay. And that is why it is a key requirement for us that land must be purchased and there must be a certificate of occupancy before we commit.
All right, so let's go back to budget. From what I heard from you tonight, the agency received its highest budgetary allocation in its history. Accountability and transparency had been an issue in the past. The last MD and 3 EDs were suspended indefinitely for fraudulent misappropriation of funds. At the end of the day, the president has a target, and Nigerians must see how these monies are expended. So how do you intend to make use of these funds and ensure accountability and transparency?
Yeah, so very good question. One of the key things is what we are doing. Before my appointment as the MD of Rural Electrification Agency, I was heading the World Bank and African Development Bank project, whereby the motto of such kind of project, it's accountability and transparency, creating a report, getting approval must be within the set guidelines. So the first thing we did is bringing this kind of system that are applicable in this project into the core REA. That is one of the first thing that we did. The second thing is also opening the Rural Electrification Agency to public scrutiny. Okay. One of the first thing the new management, I and the executive directors did was to publish the 2023 Capital Project Implementation Report, which is there in the public domain, where we provide the entirety of how the 2023 allocation was utilized. Mm-hmm. This is our own way of opening to the public, for the public to see our implementation, to hold us accountable in the implementation of our project. That is the second way. The third is to utilize information technology. Like I told you, one of the key things we want to create using the National Electrification Strategy and Implementation Plan is to democratize the entire plan by creating an app whereby any Nigerian can download that app, log on to that app, and see if we say, for example, we have deployed a mini-grid in Marathon in Zamfara State, that person can log through that app and see if that mini-grid is really established. If it is not, the app would give him an opportunity to send a query to relevant agencies that REA said they have done this, but I have been there and it has not been done. So leveraging on technology to connect with our infrastructure is another way that we are doing to ensure transparency and accountability.
So I'm concerned about local content development. Are we on course to produce some of the panels and batteries here in Nigeria instead of importing them?
Absolutely. This is also one of the key goals of Mr. President. The Honorable Minister of Power put it as one of the key performance indicators of Rural Electrification Agency to crystallize the local manufacturing in country. And we are already doing this. This is one of the greatest achievement of the President government. At this moment, here in Abuja, there is a company called JRV that has established a photovoltaic manufacturing assembly plant here in Abuja with a capacity of 250 megawatts. There is a Nevin photovoltaic also company in Lagos that has the capacity, that had already started production of 100 megawatt capacity in Lagos State. There is also a Green Volt, a Chinese company that has been working with Rural Electrification Agency for the past 5 years that is about to establish a lithium battery assembly plant. Just last week, Rural Electrification Agency hosted the promoters of a lithium battery manufacturing, not even assembly plant, the lithium battery manufacturing plant here in Nigeria, whom we are supporting, called Philip PV. This is also another.
All right, Mr. Aliyu, but because of time, so before I let you go, I'm also worried about continuity through sustainability. You had talked about your involvement in the private sector, but I do not know to what extent, because if this is purely government-based projects, don't you think we should be worried about continuity and sustainability? You may need to speak to that.
Yeah, so that is why we build all our projects around the private sector. Things that are government on tends not to have sustainability. People tend not to give it much more desired importance. And that is why most of our intervention is around the private sector. The DES project is all private sector funded. We catalyze and the private sector to deploy this infrastructure. Our state matching fund under the Rural Electrification Fund has the private sector involved in it for the private sector to continue to do it. And for the large-scale project that we have done at the university, Rural Electrification Agency is in the process of working with the Ministry of Finance Incorporated to create an asset holding company that will engage private sector O&M who will own and operate that asset for a very long period of time.
All right, Mr. Aliyu, I mean, you sound very energized and ready to meet your targets. We wish you the very best. Thank you so much for joining us tonight. Abba Aliyu is the Managing Director, Rural Electrification Agency. Thank you so much for your time in politics tonight. Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Thank you very much for watching, everyone. That marks the end of today's episode of Politics Tonight. But you can watch the repeat broadcast of this episode at midnight. Get in touch with us on our social media handles, Facebook, Instagram.
The following is a paid presentation by ShopX TV. At ShopX TV, our customers are the heart of everything we do. As a special thank you for your continued support, we are offering our customers 10% off on selected products from now till November 15th. That's right, shop now and save big on some of your favorite items while stock lasts. Don't miss out on this opportunity to grab amazing products at unbelievable prices. First is our amazing 4-in-1 CookX blender. It's a food processor, a grinder, a blender, and a juicer and blended. You would normally pay 189,950 naira for the CookX 4-in-1 blender. But call the number on your screen right now or scan the QR code and get it for just 170,995 naira. Incredible! And that's not all. You can get the CookX 4-in-1 blender in 2 easy payments of 85,498 naira. That's right, pay twice to get this amazing cooking solution. And we are not done yet. ShopX TV is proud to introduce the ShopX Ultimate Crunch Exercise Machine. The 6-in-1 machine is designed to take your fitness to the next level. No need to worry about expensive gym fees. You can now work out from the comfort of your home and achieve results. With Ultimate Crunch cutting-edge technology, you can transform your body. Its enhanced features deliver a full body workout that's efficient, effective, and enjoyable. The secret is its advanced design that combines multiple exercise models into one unit. The versatile machine features adjustable resistance levels, an ergonomic design, and a built-in digital tracking system that displays speed, time, distance, and calories burned. From sculpting your abs to toning your legs, upper body, and strengthening your core, you would normally pay up to 449,950 naira for the ShopX Ultimate Crunch. But for a limited time only, call the number on your screen now or scan the QR code and get the ShopX Ultimate Crunch at 404,955 naira. Incredible! And that's not all. You can get the ShopX Ultimate Total Crunch in 2 easy payments of 202,478 naira. That's right, pay twice to get this amazing fitness solution. But hurry, limited stocks available. So call the number on your screen now or scan the QR code or visit our website to place your order while stock lasts.
The proceeding was a paid presentation brought to you by ShopX TV.
Stay ahead with the biggest news stories. Go beyond the news headlines. Experience impactful investigations. Enjoy resourceful news coverage in real time. TVC News at 7 and TVC News at 10 p.m. Live every day on this channel. TVC News. First with breaking news.
The Inspector General of Police has met with senior officers to review the state of security.
We are continuing our coverage